So the way that I present everything, if you've watched any of the supplemental videos, have you had a chance to check those out?
Yeah, I was in the middle of watching one from Unit 2.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm really big into, can we take the symbols and connect them to the story, like the sentence that they actually would be out loud? And then
Okay.
with that in mind, can we make a picture? Like, I'm big into the meaning and I'm big into the picture, because I think that that's the only reason, the only way the symbols ever make sense is if we understand the meaning and we understand their picture. Okay. So if we're talking about number
Visual.
5, sorry?
Like a visual behind
Absolutely. Big individuals. So for number 5 in particular, if you were going to read this out loud, how would you read this out loud?
-7 square root of to the square root of 2.
Okay, that's totally fine. So I'm going to adjust the language a little bit. This is actually just -7 squared.
Okay.
Or if you would like, you can make it -7 to the second power.
Right. That's what I was trying to go by.
Either one of those is fine. I find a lot of value in writing that sentence down exactly in my notebook so that I can reference it. So if I was you, I might write down like -7 squared or -7 to the second power. So we can write that as -7. And I like to use like literally just words, right? Like that.
Gotcha.
Now this becomes a little bit ambiguous, which is exactly why the 5 and 6 are a little bit weird from each other. Negative, if I was going to give a word for negative, it would be opposite. Okay, you feel comfortable with me saying that negative means opposite?
The
or does that feel a little weird?
It means the opposite of like positive?
Yeah, in general, it usually just means opposite, period. Opposite, fill in the blank. Okay. So if I was going to make this a sentence, let's again, we'll make this opposite of 7 squared. Okay.
Okay.
Now this part is, this is the difficulty. It's a little ambiguous. Are we talking about the opposite of 7 or are we talking about the opposite of the square? Like that's the part where this starts to get a little bit weird. And that's exactly the detail we're going to play with here. Because of the parentheses, what would you guess is the opposite referring to?
The opposite of the sign.
Good. Is that the opposite of the square or the opposite of 7? What's your gut instinct?
The opposite of 7.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So in this case, we're talking about the opposite of 7, and then I'm going to use that to make a square. So watch how we can do that. I'm going to literally make a square, and this is what they would do in the olden times, like we're talking ancient Greece, 300 BC, like long time ago. When they're talking about making a square, they're saying I'm going to use it like I would a tape measure, and I'm going to put it as a length on either side.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if you have it written this way, what would -7 times -7 be?
It's 49.
It positive or negative?
Positive, because
it's very, that's exactly right. So it's 49 positive. So we get to recognize now what we're actually doing. Squaring is nothing more than saying I'm going to multiply the -7 by itself, because one's a length and one's a width, for my square.
Okay.
And then when you do that, you already had that gut instinct, that knowledge that a negative times a negative is like opposite of an opposite.
Okay.
Right? It's kind of like the cha-cha, like in I'm a big wedding dancer myself. Cha-cha slide always comes on. They got that reverse moment, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, no, everyone does that wrong. Like, you're supposed to turn around and then you turn back. Like, you don't just keep flipping crazy. Like, so anyway, that's what's happening here. So we got a positive 49 because I'm doing the opposite of an opposite.
Okay.
Okay.
And
now
so
this one, go ahead.
On the, like, because I get so anxious with tests. So on the test, if you were to give us a question like this, are you looking for us to show our work in this way?
I absolutely am. Yeah, if there is a way for you to submit work, I will be looking for your work to explain your thoughts.
Okay.
Now you've got a
So it
lot
would,
of different venues to do that. You could start and you could do it just with the numbers, right? You could say that -7 squared, like this means 2 repetitions of -7 means +49. Like if you just wrote the numbers, I'm okay with that. If you wrote the picture as a way of helping you with the numbers, I'm also okay with that. Whatever you used, however you would explain it to somebody else in class,
you're
I want
okay
to
with
see
it.
it. So the reason why, like I said, I give you all these is because not because I need to see everything, is because I want to find out what resonates with you. And I want you to be like, this is the thing that makes sense, because that's all you need. You just need one way that makes sense. And then everything else is just a different way of showing that.
What's okay? So your question, what's comfortable for me would be the like writing it out. So the -7 in parentheses, and then the other -7, and then equal 49. That makes sense for me.
Okay, so you like the 2 repetitions of the -7. Cool, then keep that. That's great. Everything else is just background then. Everything else is just how you could read it out loud. Everything else is why do we call it square? Like it's so like it's just that's just extra. But I'm okay if you just give me this and understand this. That's fine.
Okay. Gotcha.
All right, you ready for number 6? Okay. So again, if we were going to read this out loud, notice that this would be, well, how would you read this out loud? Give it a guess.
Opposite of 9 squared.
Opposite of 9 squared. That's exactly right. So again, if you don't like this method, that's cool. I'm just going to give it to you so you have it as a reference, but you don't have to use it for every problem. It's just there if you'd like it. So we have the opposite of, I can make that just 9 squared. And notice that this is, again, that other kind of ambiguous case, because it's talking about, like, are we talking about the opposite of the square, or are we talking about the opposite of the 9? What do you think?
The opposite of the 9.
Mm-hmm. This one is actually going to be the opposite of the square. And like I said, it's just simply a small notation thing. There's nothing inherently here that would make us need that, like need to know that. It's just in recognizing the meaning behind the symbols.
Okay.
So where this one comes from, exactly right. If you'd like, one way that I know I was taught when I was first given this was that you have the order of operations, right? I don't know if you've seen that one. It's the whole PEMDAS idea of what goes first in an equation. So in this one here, you can see that exponents happens before negatives. Negatives would be a type of multiplication. So the exponents is happening first. That's how we know the square is happening first, and then we make it an opposite.
Okay.
Now, again, now that we know that this is talking about the opposite of a 9 square, just to kind of give you some background, again, if you're talking like, where did this actually come from? Like, why do we call it a square? It's because you have a 9 by 9 square. How big would that be?
Um, 81.
81. Now, if I asked you for the opposite of that square, how big would that be?
-81.
And that's exactly where it comes from. So that's the background information. If you're looking for a way that you can write it, you can, if you'd like, put some parentheses around this 9 square just to make it visually obvious that we're going to do the square part first. And then if you'd like, we're just going to say, okay, the negative is going to tag along. I'm going to take care of what 9 squared means, which is repeating it twice. And that gets you the opposite of 81.
Okay. Okay, I see the difference between the questions.
Yeah. So like I said, there's nothing inherently there. It's just an abbreviation. So it's always about trying to figure out like, what does this mean behind the symbols?
Okay. Okay, so I understand that a little bit better
Great.
when you speak it to me.
Yeah, I'm all about it. I think that
Okay.
that sometimes reading it is the hardest way of learning it. So I'm about that.
Oh yeah, and I'm very visual when it comes to learning. So it's, yeah, it's helpful.